Viva Nembrum quodlibet, viva Nembra quodlibet, semper sinti in flore, semper sinti in flore.
Hi.
Good evening. Today, we have a very good chance to speak with one of the authors interesting for our country and our region. And the topic is related to the book he wrote. It is about modern Albania. I would like to introduce Mr. Fred Abrahams, who is Associate Program Director of the Human Rights Watch and publicist, and the author of the book, published in Serbia in 2019 by Clio, and our guest for tonight. This conversation, Fred, is dedicated for, not dedicated actually, it is for the purpose of pretext for our roundtable, which will be held sometime later with experts and historians mostly, and Albanologists regarding the modern history of Albania. And your book will be some kind of a pretext for that round table. And we are very glad to have you tonight.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry we cannot meet in person. I cannot be with you all in Belgrade, but I'm very, very grateful to Clio for publishing the book, and of course the university and to you for giving this opportunity. Look forward to speaking with you all.
So next time in Belgrade. So you should come to Belgrade and we will do it directly. But okay, we understand those pandemic circumstances and we should do what we can do for the moment. We are speaking about your book, Modern Albania, which covers some period from dissolving of the authoritarian regime of Envera Hodže, from 1985 to, let's say, 2015. Am I correct? Maybe it is a little bit later timing.
Yes, I mean, the book, it was published in 2015. Really, it ended, the reporting ended around 2013.
So you're following, let's say, from Envera Hodže death to up to Edi Rama, something like that.
That's correct.
Shall we say like that? Beginning of the reign of Edi Rama.
That is correct.
This period. I would like to mention one very interesting thing, because I was in Albania at that time, not at that time, but 1993, 94, for 2-3 months visiting some friends in Shkodër. And I was witnessing, let's say, a little bit of what is happening. It was the time when Sali Berisha was in charge, before Fatah Nano. So I do know something about, as much as I could understand, because I'm not speaking Albanian. As much as I understood you speaking Albanian.
I am. I wish I spoke better. I have a coffee shop Albanian. Coffee shop.
For how long you've been in Albania, actually?
I first went to Tirana in the summer of 1993 and went there for a few months, but ended up staying for 1 year. So I lived there for 93 until the middle of 94.
Oh, and that's probably same time when I was there. So, but you were probably in Tirana.
Mostly Tirana, but traveled a great deal. Yes.
Yeah, and later on, you were coming and going.
Then, yeah, very often coming and going. I covered Albania for the organization Human Rights Watch, and up until 97. 98, I was very active working on and in Albania. Then, of course, in 97, 98, and 99, I was mostly engaged with Kosovo and the Kosovo War. Then in 2000, I stopped working on the Balkans. I now do other work for Human Rights Watch.
As much as I could read, you prepared that book, Modern Albania, and tried to cover actually political history in a way, in a publicistic way, of course, but not only like a journalist or like some witness from the backside, but interviewing almost all of the big players in the game, and not only them, but some like 200 persons with personal interviews and reading a lot of materials, even some classified and declassified probably. And this is, let's say, this is a good pretext for understanding the matter better, not only reading newspapers or following the TV or something, but also speaking to the major players in that game. That is something remarkable from my point of view, because when I start reading your book, I read it almost like a novel. It has some kind of drama inside, and you are following the main actors from the beginning as they are growing, let's say like that, and till they are changing the roles during these 30 years of the activity. This is completely challenging because here in Serbia and of course ex-Yugoslavia, we did not follow it in that way. And this is interesting from our point of view to see something which we were not accustomed to follow. I should explain a little bit, sorry for my long speech, because we were looking at Albania like Envera Hodže time and later chaos. And of course, it is not just like that simple, of course, but this is the main thing which I want to ask you. How it is possible from one such an authoritarian regime to build democratic institutions, let's say in a short period of 30 years, and that these democratic institutions start working, start changing the country. As much as we can see, it is not yet changed as it should be probably, but this process is not direct process. This process has many curves. From your perspective, how does it look to you?
Well, look, first of all, I had an incredibly unique opportunity because I could be in Tirana and witness these events. It's a very small country, a small city, and so you could get to know the people. And I really wanted to tell the story not as an academic and not as a journalist, but to give some color, some flavor, some feeling for what it means to come out of extreme totalitarianism.
Yes.
And, I mean, obviously Yugoslavia is a completely different, was a different system, but, even compared to Romania, compared to East Germany, Albania was far, far more restrictive, more repressive, more closed with no comparison. And, so you see the effect of that today, very much so. And I think it is much too simplistic if somebody says, well, they don't understand democracy, they don't know, independent institutions. That's a simplistic and even a bit insulting. It's really about a political culture, because you're coming out of a system where the control was so strong. Everyone grew up with the party or the person, really, Envera Hodže. And it's hard to adjust from that. And we see the effect of it. We still see the effect of it very much today. There is not a tradition of independent institutions, right? There's also a very strong tradition of paternal authoritarianism or authoritarian paternalism. Where
yes.
You have a strong leader, a man, right? And the country is very much still dominated by men. And who tend to want, have control over large sectors of the economy and the politics and the culture. I stress culture because we have an artist in power today in Albania, and people, who have a tradition of looking to those strong leaders. But I think one element I would like to talk about with you today is not just the Albanian perspective, but the international perspective. Because if we look at the politics, and maybe we'll come to this, Branko, but the politics from the European Union, the politics from the United States, they have had a very major role on Albania, and not always constructive, not always positive to build democracy and to build the rule of law. And we can talk more about that. I think there are some reasons for that. Well, there's a reason for everything.
Yeah.
And there are some examples, right? There are some examples, and some of these examples of how it failed also affect Serbia. They affect the region, but some of them had a very, very direct effect. I'm talking about Kosovo, and we can speak about that.
Yeah, it is interesting that you make a point about that, because usually ordinary viewers in Serbia, they treat this in a simple way as the Western fingers coming to our soup, you know. They are directing everything and they are responsible for everything. Of course, I do not agree with that in complete. But there are some various interests. And we usually speak when there is some American like Fred today. Okay, he's American, that means he's from the governmental side of America, and not to say exactly that he is a spy or something, but he has some influences and some interests in America itself to do some certain job. That is our perspective. I mean, perspective as a country, usually. In a very simplific way, you know. I do not agree with it, but of course this kind of public opinion, let's say. And usually they say that the foreign governments, they are interfering in everything. Ambassadors and the embassies are interfering in everything. They are doing everything, and we are not responsible for anything except for some dirty things we did. And that's the general point of view from our public opinion. And that was the reason why at the beginning I told you that it is interesting to watch Albania from your side, not from our, because we are full of the prejudice in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to view this in an objective way. My lens, of course, is through human rights. You know, that's how I'm analyzing these politics in the region. You know, and are these governments building a rule of law with separation of powers, where there are independent courts, where there are free media, where there is a depoliticized police, depoliticized intelligence agencies? You know, and, you know, in Albania, of course, they have come a long way. I mean, it's ridiculous to compare. You cannot say, you know, that Albania has not moved. You cannot say it has not changed. I mean, you know, everything is different in Albania. But, you know, we shouldn't compare with Envera Hodge's time, right? That's not a standard.
Far away, yes.
That's not a standard for democracy.
Yeah.
You have to look at where Albania is today, and have they achieved to create a pluralistic political system that is fair, that gives justice, that it has transparency, that gives dignity. And, you know, there's progress, of course, all over the place. I mean, you know, people travel. There are endless newspapers and media and television stations. And, you know, I mean, there's really on and on and on and on. In many ways, it's a free country. But is it really a democratic country? And my answer, I mean, you know, I don't want to say yes, it is, and no, it isn't. But the challenges are everywhere. The challenges in Albania are everywhere. And, you know, one of the best ways we can see that is people want to leave. You know, the brain drain in Albania is very serious. The best and the brightest people often are looking to work and move and live abroad. And that's a very sad commentary, and it's very damaging for the country. It's damaging for the long-term health of the country. And, you know, so you have elections in Albania. We have elections are coming on April 25th, right?
Yes.
But, you know, are they, you know, do we have a system where people's voices are truly heard, meaning that the policies are made in the interests of the people? Not yet. You know, you still have very high degrees of corruption in Albania, very high. You still have politicians who are there for their own interests. And I'm talking about in the government, I'm talking about in the opposition. People who see this as an opportunity and not to serve the public, but to serve themselves. Yes. And I think maybe this is a tradition across the region. It is not unique. Absolutely not unique. Not unique, sadly, you know, sadly so. But Albania, it is a very marked problem. It is a grave problem. Why young people are looking to move, and it shows how hard it is to build democratic institutions after totalitarianism, right? And I just want to say one thing that I think is important and interesting, and that
go ahead.
Well, it's that when communism fell, there was really shock therapy, and Western governments, the World Bank, the IMF, and the EU, of course, they were pushing a kind of shock therapy, right? And I think this was a big mistake. And I am not a radical leftist. I'm not a socialist, and I'm not a human rights idealist. No, I'm very pragmatic. But you cannot push full free market reform and also free elections unless you have the infrastructure, right? You need the pillars of a democratic house to hold up the roof. Yep. And you push radical neoliberal economic reform, but you don't have the laws. You don't have the structures and the institutions. Well, what do you get? Well, in Albania, you got pyramid schemes. You actually had pyramid schemes. And I don't mean small scale pyramid schemes. I know there were pyramid schemes in Serbia as well. I'm talking about pyramid schemes that when they crashed, they destroyed the country, right? 2,000 people died. 2,000 Albanians died in the chaos of 1997.
You mean in armed
struggle? I mean, yeah, criminality, fighting, chaos, looting. I don't mean straight political violence. No, I don't mean that. But this was the result of radical neoliberal reform without thinking, right? Without building the infrastructure. And that's a big issue. I mean, the other one that's interesting, and I hope maybe we can talk about it, or the panel after me can speak about it, is Western policy on Albania has always focused on stability. Stability has always been more important than democracy. Stability over democracy, individuals over institutions. And for the Albanians, it was particularly strong because of Macedonia, North Macedonia, Kosovo, of course, Prešovo Valley, and Montenegro, right? And US policy, I'm most familiar with US policy. US policy has always been interested to have a moderate Albanian, to lower Albanian nationalism, and for Albania to play a moderating role in the region. Right. So there was a kind of rule, it's kind of a Faustian deal, right? A Faustian arrangement where the leaders of Albania could pretty much do what they wanted. You could rule Albania more or less as you wanted within limits. I mean, of course, there are European standards and, we're not talking, Stalinism. I mean, within limits, but you cannot play outside the borders. Yeah. Don't play outside the borders. And every Albanian ruler, post-communist that has tried to play outside the borders has suffered some pushback, right? And I just say that because it's interesting now with Prime Minister Edi Rama, because he is again he's using some strong language about unification and has not suffered such a big blowback yet. But I do know it has gotten people's attention. I do know that Western capitals are watching this. Because it crosses a line for them.
I will interfere a little bit about involving Kosovo problem in that, because me myself, I was very surprised, I should say, when I visited Albania, that the Albanian perspective and Kosovo perspective, let's say they are the same people, is not the same.
No.
Usually in Serbia and in ex-Yugoslavia, we are making the equal understanding of Kosovo and Albania. They want to unite, and they are the same people. They speak the same language. They have the same idea, same idealism, and same thing. I realized, and it was a surprise to me when I come down there in Shkodër, to see that it is actually not like that. And this is something we have to face. Albania is not Kosovo. Albania is not North Macedonia. So I noticed that in your book that you are referring to these problems in a different way, not the way we are used to to cope with from our side of perspective. And I would like you to probably you are still following what is going on here, and it sometimes looks like an endless story about Kosovo problem. Do you think the way out of this like premeditated solution about one Albania, one big country involving part of North Macedonia, involving Kosovo, maybe even some other in Greek or some other territories?
Well, first, I mean, I agree what you said. The differences between Albanians in Kosovo and in Albania are very, they're significant. In some ways, they are growing closer because now they're getting to know each other, right? In 93, 94, they didn't know each other at all, right? Yeah. And it was very interesting. Kosovars, they grew up with a glorified image of Albania because they were in Kosovo, and in their experience, they looked to Albania, the homeland of Albanians, and they glorified Envera Hodje, and they didn't know, they didn't know how repressive it was. And when they came to Tirana or to Albania for the first time, they were shocked, right? They were shocked also because Albania was very, very poor, it was a real, and there are significant differences in mentality. A friend of mine, he made an important observation. He said, look at the cafes in Pristina and look at the cafes in Tirana. So the cafes in Pristina before, now I haven't been for a while, they had the names of great of Albanian historical, Dardania, Illyria, cafes, right? And in Tirana, the cafes were Cafe Berlusconi, Cafe Rome, Cafe Real Madrid, Cafe Fame, Cafe Rio. And this says a lot, right? The organization of the people, and so, but and politically they're very different. The political leadership is very different. Financially, they are very different. The financial interests are very different. And I think that kind of unification is a long way off. But I mean, at the same time, there is a cultural affinity. I mean, they do, they share language and history and culture.
Yeah, of course.
And, but my interest in the way I've always approached this is about democracy. The answer to this question is how to resolve the issues around borders, in my opinion, is through democracy, where that, if people are consulted, if people have a voice, if people have transparency, if they have wise policies from their leaders, if they have an opportunity to seek redress, meaning if you are wronged, Branko, if you are wronged, right, someone steals your property, somebody beats you up, somebody doesn't respect your contract, that you can go to the court, right? You can go to the court and someone will really listen and you have a fair chance that, even without money, you don't have to pay the judge, those are the principles of democracy. And if those grow in Albania, in Kosovo, and in Serbia, then there are opportunities to have a peaceful resolution, and what does that mean? I mean, that's for the people of the region to decide what that means. Is it closer economic cooperation? Is it political alliances, allegiances? Is it changes of borders? Those are decisions that can be made if the proper channels exist. And right now we're far away from that. So the tensions exist. Obviously, the tensions exist. The memories are fresh, and they can be used. They can be used by the politicians who want to stir up emotion and distract, stir up emotion and distract from the problems of today.
From the real issues.
From the real issues. If it's corona, if it's unemployment, if it's corruption, then everyone in the region can use nationalism as a distraction from that.
We will conclude our conversation for tonight with a very interesting mail you sent to me that you have collected quite a lot of materials let's say, not only from your conversations with the participants in the game, and also from various newspapers and whatever you did collect there. I saw some of them, but also some, let's say, classified or declassified governmental papers, and you are offering very kindly for everybody to use it as for the purposes of research. This seems to me like a very good source of materials useful to get, let's say, not only one-dimensional look at the problems as we are trying to resolve the problem. You know, this seems to be interesting me, very interesting to me. And during our conversation on the round table, I will look for the historians' way of thinking, what they think about your very kind proposals. Fred, it was very inspirative talking to you. I hope we will meet again in a more direct way when the time comes. And of course, you will get all these materials which we were speaking about this edition, and maybe even continue some kind of discussion later. I'm mostly interested to speak with you about Kosovo and way to solve the problems in Kosovo from your perspective, of course. And that will be the topic for some other meeting with you. I hope soon.
Branko, it's my pleasure. And if there are any historians, journalists, or others who would like to have access to these documents from the US archives, I'm very happy to provide them. And they should be used. They should be used. So
we will try to do something about that.
With great pleasure. Thank you for this chance to speak.
Fred, thank you very much, really, indeed. How is the weather in Berlin? What are you doing in Berlin, actually?
Well, no, we don't go outside for health reasons. So
you're locked up. You're locked up. Huh?
Locked up and locked down.
Oh, sorry for that, you know, but this is not only for you, all of us that are facing the same problem. Have a good luck, take safe measures, of course, and hopefully when this pandemic goes away, we are going to meet in person.
With great pleasure. I look forward to that.
Thank you very much.
Vidimo se. Hvala vam.
Molim.